Namaskar. This year, we are marking the culmination of the celebrations of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. To mark this occasion, I welcome you all to this Gandhi Katha being narrated by Mrs. Shobhana Radhkrishna. Gandhi ji was born on 2nd October 1869 at Porbandar, a coastal town in the Indian state of Gujarat. He went on to become the world's Mahatma, or the Great Soul. He was born in India, but remains one of India's greatest gifts to the world. Today, amidst numerous complex challenges confronting the mankind, Gandhiji's message of peace and compassion has a special resonance. In fact, as Gandhiji himself said, his life is his message. The ideals that he championed are a part of India's collective living heritage and will lead the country through the challenges of the present and those we will face in the future. I invite everyone to the Katha of Mahatma Gandhi and to imbibe his values of truth and non-violence. My best wishes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador H.E. Shri Santosh Jhaji, for your kind message and support. Namaskar and welcome to the Gandhi Katha, story of Mahatma Gandhi, narrated by me during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, which incidentally is also the 150th birth anniversary of Kasturba Gandhi, his wife. I express gratitude to the Embassy of India, Brussels, in Belgium, for hosting the Gandhi Katha amidst these challenging times to learn from Gandhiji's philosophy of truth, non-violence, and purity of means, his spirituality, his environmental credo, his practices of health and wellness of body, mind, and spirit, for coping up and staying safe physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually during and after the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected the entire humanity. On October 2nd, the world celebrates the UN International Day of Nonviolence, and in India, we celebrate the anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi as Gandhi Jayanti. The entire world is remembering Mahatma Gandhi, the apostle of peace and nonviolence. We have an opportunity to remind the humanity of the efficacy of the messages of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation. I pay my respects to the leading lights of Belgium and Luxembourg and convey my warm wishes to the Belgians, Luxembourgers, and the Indian community who have joined me online today. Mahatma Gandhi's name finds resonance across the continents and continues to inspire countless people. Through his teachings, of nonviolence. I'm happy to learn that in Park Marie Josie in the commune of Molenbeek in Brussels, there is there is the oldest statue of Mahatma Gandhi in Europe. The statue, sculpted by the renowned Belgian artist René Cliquet, was installed in 1969 to mark the 100th birth anniversary of Gandhiji. Gandhi Jayanti is commemorated every year at the memorial. A road at Molenbeek in Brussels called Avenue Mahatma Gandhi has been named after the Mahatma. There is a statue of Mahatma Gandhi at the Antwerp Provincial Gardens at Antwerp in Belgium. Dr. Kathy Burks, governor of the province of Antwerp, wrote in the Gandhi anthology, and I quote from her article: there is more to learn from Gandhi when it comes to more sustainable planet. Inspired by Gandhi and enthused by the spreading Belgian scholar movement, I want to underline and promote the essence of sustainable society based upon the sober living, upon reducing, refusing, and reusing. Gandhi gave the world a visionary perspective for creating a sustainable world. Unquote. Mr. Asselborn, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Government of Luxembourg, wrote in Gandhi Anthology, and I quote: Gandhi's beliefs are universal and transcend all cultures and countries. However different or similar they are, despite their differences in size, he brings together Luxembourg and India based on the same principle of democracy, the international rule of law, and especially the desire to secure a culture of peace, tolerance, understanding, and non-violence. Unquote. Gandhi Katha is based on the ancient Indian oral tradition of Katha or storytelling with hymns and narrations. I have given talks in Gandhi Katha in 94 countries, hosted by the Indian missions during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Gandhiji in the past 2 years. In all the countries, people have great reverence and respect for Mahatma Gandhi. Many have been inspired by him to take up the cudgels against injustice through nonviolence. Others have followed his environmental credo, and still others have been deeply touched by his simple spiritual life. The humanism of the world's thought leaders are so deeply reflected in Mahatma Gandhi's teachings. The new generation is eager to understand more about this greatest man of the last century who made such a huge impact on humanity and inspired many world leaders. Gandhiji used to begin and end his day with prayers. These were prayers from all the religions of the world, Sarva Dharma Prarthana. Gandhiji's internal core comprised of the essence of all the religions, one that he had acquired from long study and reflection, the devotional poetry of the saint poets that he had heard, sung, and absorbed since childhood made up a significant part of the life of his soul. He said that ultimately all the religions point to the same truth of compassion, love, forgiveness, and tolerance, and that everyone must study the essence of all the religions in an attitude of perfect reverence and must have friendship and respect for the practitioners of different religions and diverse cultures. The ancient scripture Rig Veda from India confirms it, saying, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vadanti. There is only one truth, and learned persons call it by many names. This verse is reminding us that there are many paths that lead to God. We will begin with the Sanskrit prayer, Asatoma Sadgamaya, which asks God to lead us from untruth to truth, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. This prayer during these challenging times of coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic is for the well-being and safety of everyone and to live in harmony with Mother Nature.
Asatoma Sadgamaya Asato Ma Sadgamaya 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 Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya 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 Mrityoma Amritam Gamaya Amritam Gamaya Amritam Gamaya Mrityoma Amritam Gamaya Amritam Gamaya Amritam Gamaya Amritam Gamaya.
Even after 7 decades since Gandhiji passed on, in every part of the world, his relevance is felt as strongly as ever before, and his visions and actions are of an enduring significance for all times and places. His approach to life was holistic and cannot be divided into watertight compartments of social, religious, political, public, or personal life. Gandhiji stands out as the champion not only of political democracy but also of economic and spiritual democracy in today's world. Gandhiji believed that moral degeneration is the root cause of all evils, including conflicts. This explains his lifelong crusade of attainment of moral values such as truthfulness, nonviolence, purity of means, love, respect, self control, forgiveness, friendliness, compassion, mercy, and so on. For Gandhiji, the principle of satyagraha or non-violent resistance and civil disobedience was by non cooperation with evil through the moral values of love force, truth force, and soul force with sacrifice and self suffering. For him, the consideration for the sufferings of fellow human beings was of paramount importance. His belief and actions that social change for establishing justice and dignity of humans is both less harmful and more sustainable when achieved by nonviolent means. His legacy of satyagraha is widely recognized the world over and is seen in many movements for civil rights even till today. Mahatma Gandhi's environmental practices were based on conservation of natural resources, which were often misused and overused for the sake of development. Gandhiji had warned about the unsustainability on the global scale and had said that greed will be the main reason for the environmental degradation and the ecological crisis. He had predicted all this a century ago. Gandhiji was the first environmentalist much before the entire world was preoccupied by concerns about the environmental degradation or ecological crisis. With his stunning premonition and knowledge, he had declared that the earth has enough for man's needs, but not for man's greed. He had also said, the earth, the air, the land, and the water are not an inheritance from our forefathers, but on loan from our children. So we have to hand it over to them as it was handed over to us. Equality for women within the society was a principle Gandhiji passionately believed in. His vision of Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, becomes very relevant in the crisis of internally displaced people and migrants. It may well have been keeping in mind the very basic unit of human organization, a village or a county. His vision of Gram Swaraj, which is self reliant, independent, a self governed village, is built on the premises of sustainable growth and is the need of the hour. According to my understanding, Mahatma Gandhi's life was an epic of faith and endeavor. His faith was in truth, the ultimate reality of truth, and he endeavored to attain it through non-violence throughout his life till the very last breath. Gandhiji's adherence to truth, non-violence, and purity of means has inspired me to give Gandhi Katha so that people can put their hearts into understanding Gandhiji, get inspired to learn from his extraordinary ethical and moral leadership, his simple spiritual life, revolutionary thoughts, actions, his lifelong service to humanity against all forms of injustice, and how he continues to inspire people in all the parts of the globe at all times and in all ages. Perhaps the greatest source of strength for Mahatma Gandhi was in his faith in God. Truth was the deepest and the most complete form of God. That faith gave him the constant awareness that he was to be nothing but an instrument in his hands. He was to go wherever he was led. For him, the guidance of God constituted two things. One, he had to walk on the path enlightened by truth that was available to him in whatever measures and form. That was the path on which the teachers of the world had already walked. Two, he had to constantly gaze inwards and find inspiration through self introspection, self examination, and self purification. And that he did by repeated questioning. And that question was, Ko Aham, who am I? What am I? And what is the real purpose of my life? This question has been asked in our ancient Indian civilization since the past 5,000 years. The answer came to Gandhiji that the real purpose of life was to serve others. The deeper the faith, the greater was the endeavor for Mahatma Gandhi. He had said truth is God, Satya hi Parmeshwar. Faith in truth led Mahatma Gandhi to two other realizations. If God is omnipresent, then truth is omnipresent too. If each human being were an aspect of God, then each person is capable of being truthful, of being good, and doing good to others. The second realization was that, in spite of all the upheavals in the history of humankind, humanity will only progress in an auspicious direction because truth, that is God, is only interested in the welfare of its creation. His endeavor throughout his life was devoted to the search of that element of truth, to awaken it and to nurture it. This is why he could feel oneness with everyone. For most of us, this realization does not set in easily. But because of this understanding of oneness, Gandhiji had no enemies. He did not want to settle scores with anyone, and he did not want to take any revenge. He merely wanted to extend his love, compassion, and respect to everyone. That was one of his traits. He respected individuals as individuals without attaching labels. And that was one more trait that we see in Gandhiji. Another trait that was that he remained forever positive and calm in spite of all the upheavals that he had faced. And he had faced many challenges. And that's one of the greatest traits that we see in Gandhiji. Romeo Rolla, the famous French writer and pacifist who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, wrote the biography of Mahatma Gandhi in 1924, and that made Gandhiji known to the world. In 1931, on his way back from the second Roundtable Conference in London, Gandhiji went to Switzerland and stayed in Villeneuve for 5 days and met Romeo Rolla every day. So Romeo Rolla wrote, and I quote, This little man is so fragile in appearance, is tireless, and fatigue is a word that does not exist in his vocabulary. He could calmly answer for hours without a muscle of face twitching. His mind proceeds through successive experiments into action, and he follows a straight line, but he never stops. Unquote. I will play the Gandhi Katha Dhun in Hindi. This is a hymn in Hindi which elaborates on Gandhiji's definition of truth as having harmony between thought, word, and deed.
मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर होगा सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर होगा मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर होगा सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर होगा
Mahatma Gandhi is the greatest apostle of peace the world has seen in the recent past. His notion of peace is focused on tolerance, forgiveness, compassion, oneness, respect, truth force, love force, soul force, self suffering, and sacrifice. Albert Einstein, the greatest scientist of the first half of the 20th century, had called Mahatma Gandhi as the supreme practical leader for change. And listen into his voice.
I believe that Gandhi's views were the most enlightened of all the political men in our time. We should strive to do things in his spirit, not to use violence in fighting for our cause, but by non-participation in anything you believe is evil.
Gandhiji was the conscience keeper of humanity. That his ideas will be an inspiration to us both as individuals and as a society is beyond any doubt. He was an epoch maker, one who could sow the seeds for the next generation from the fruits of the previous one. Gandhiji is the most powerful visionary and a practical idealist from the first half of the last century, whose life is a role model for us all. But the effort has to begin from a point where you're standing. That is what made all Mahatma Gandhi's idealist actions practical, and he can be truly called a man of action. But it does not only mean that he was very busy, that he was. What we mean is the action of putting ideas or beliefs into practice more than anything else was the driving force in his life. The answer for Mahatma Gandhi was always found in action. He had said, an ounce of practice is worth more than tons of preaching. But if you want to understand Gandhiji, you will have to understand him not only with the intellect, but also from the emotional part of you and from acts from his life. Usually, people see him from different perspectives. And some people will think of Gandhiji mostly as a politician. But at the same time, some would think of him as a saint. And there are others who will think of Gandhiji as a nation builder. He may be all these. But I think when we consider Gandhiji, we have to try to find out what is the common stream in all these different aspects of life that you see in his personality. One was the commitment to value, and the second one was efficiency in the kind of work that he did. This is part of his comprehensiveness, and there was a unique blend of, for example, enthusiasm on one hand and patience on the other. Mahatma Gandhi has made significant and seminal contributions that span across such disciplines as environment, economics, spirituality, conflict resolution, international peace, civil rights, education, society, politics, and much more. At that time, the most harmful and destructive impact on the world was that of imperialism, violence, war, materialism, and the greed for controlling the world. Mahatma Gandhi advised to shun these seven social sins in his speech on October 22nd, 1925. Politics without principle, wealth without work, commerce without ethics, knowledge without character, pleasure without conscience, science without morality, worship without sacrifice. In my opinion, Mahatma Gandhi's life left the most powerful and strong imprint on the humanity of the world. He said, and I quote, "My life is my message." Unquote. John Haynes Holmes was a pacifist, anti war activist, and the founder of American Civil Liberties Union. He had met Gandhiji in London in 1931, and later on he traveled to India and met Gandhiji once again in 1947. He found Mahatma Gandhi's presence, those bright eyes shining through his spectacles, his voice so clear and yet so gentle, his whole presence so simple and yet so strong. He said, and I quote, "I believe that he is unquestionably the greatest man living in the world today. When I think of Gandhi, I think of Jesus Christ." Unquote. I will play the Gandhi Katha hymn in Hindi about Gandhiji's philosophy of truth, non-violence, purity of means that combine together in Satyagraha.
लागी रे लगन लागी रे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन लागी रे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सत्य अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन लागी लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन
Time magazine had listed out three most important protests over 190 years. The first one was the Boston Tea Party. The second one was the Dandi March or Salt Satyagraha. And the third one was the March of Washington. We can see a common thread. The first and second were against the same company, the East India Company. There is a common thread of non-violence in all three. In 1930, with a pinch of salt, Mahatma Gandhi shook the world. He started out on 12th March from his Sabarmati ashram in Ahmedabad in Gujarat for Dandi seashore with 79 fellow marchers. Walked for 24 days, walking 10 miles a day, stopped at 48 villages, gave speeches morning and evening to motivate people and mobilize them to participate in the Salt Satyagraha. He covered 241 miles till he reached Dandi seashore on 5th April. In the early hours of the morning on 6th April, when he bent down and picked up a fistful of muddy lump of earth with salt, 100,000 people joined him. And towards the end of the salt satyagraha, 300,000 people broke the salt law all over India. 1,362 newspapers covered the news worldwide. William Lawrence Shearer, the American journalist, was present during the Salt Satyagraha at Dharasana, and his graphic reporting brought the incidents to the notice of the world, and it woke them up to the atrocities of the British rulers and the power of non-violence and satyagraha. So Mahatma Gandhi remains the most powerful global brand ambassador of ahimsa, non-violence, a youth icon for fighting against injustice in all forms, an apostle of peace and non-violence, a man whose values can make the world a better place today. Gandhiji spent his 18 formative years in India. That is where the seeds of spirituality were sown. Those 3 years that he spent in London as a student of law gave him an opportunity to meet and interact with reformers and thinkers of that time. And he read the works of the great philosophers and poets of the West, and his vision expanded. His interest in understanding and knowing religions started from that time. And later on, as he became Barrister Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, he also learned the lessons of citizenship. He spent 20 years in South Africa as a political organizer and a leader. In 1904, in South Africa, after reading John Ruskin's book, Unto This Last, Barrister Mohandas Gandhi transformed his life overnight and started leading a community life of voluntary poverty, self control, bread labor, and sarvodaya, welfare of all. He established four ashrams in his lifetime, two in South Africa called Phoenix Settlement in 1904 and Tolstoy Farm in 1910, and two ashrams in India, Sabarmati Ashram in Ahmedabad, Gujarat in 1917, and the Sevagram Ashram in Wardha, Maharashtra in 1936. It is here that Kasturba Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, and the ashram community lived in poverty like the common villagers of India. Ashrams were his ideals of a non-violent, face-to-face society for Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, and carrying out constructive programs, which is his second gift to humanity. The first being Satyagraha. Gandhiji's ashrams had a mingling of political and spiritual aims. It was a practical laboratory for transforming ordinary men and women into extraordinary satyagrahis, for offering the highest sacrifice in the freedom struggle, on one hand, and to get involved in constructive programs to serve the poorest of the poor, to establish their self respect and dignity. So his ashrams not only were the training grounds, but a place where he carried out Sarvodaya, welfare of all, Swavalamban, self reliance, cleanliness, Swachhata, and Seva, service to humanity, and constructive programs for realizing his vision of Gram Swaraj or village republic. I am happy to inform you that I was born in the last ashram in Sevagram. My father was inspired by Gandhiji since his childhood and joined the non-violent freedom struggle and lived in the Sevagram ashram. Even after Gandhiji passed on in 1948, for more than 5 decades, my parents and all of us have continued to walk on the path that Gandhiji has shown to humanity. So, what I'm telling you is based on my own understanding, what my fathers told me, and my own experience of carrying out Gandhiji's vision. The life and thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi are intertwined and inseparable. His politics was imbued with his spiritual experiments, and his spirituality was tempered by his vision of a non-violent society. And his constructive program was integral to his politics. The unique practices of Mahatma Gandhi, his control of palate, his fasts, his spinning, his silence, and his prayers gave him the internal strength and were as much a part of his politics as of his spiritual life. These practices and experiments were sustained and nurtured by the inmates of the ashrams that he had founded. The ashram community, through their own practices, affirmed, modified, and validated Mahatma Gandhi's ideals and practices and continues to do so even till today. This shows the relevance of Gandhiji's practices. Gandhiji carried out his experiments in health and wellness in these ashrams through nature cure, diet control, fasting, hydrotherapy, sun bath, mud packs, and observing silence for one whole day. So all the people in the ashram practiced and validated these practices. Our friend and the British Quaker, Sir Horace Alexander, and he lived in Gandhiji's ashrams in Ahmedabad as well as in Vartha. He said, and I quote, Gandhi had wonderful courtesy and punctuality. I was to learn quickly that he was the slave of the watch. He had more to do in every 24 hours than almost any other man. So he had learned how to pack the most into every minute. Yet he never gave the impression of being hurried and impatient. Unquote. Gandhiji has given three gifts to humanity. The first one is Satyagraha, about which many people know a lot of things but not all the things. Constructive programs about which very few people are aware. And the third one is Ekadasha Vrata, or the 11 observances, which people do not know about. These were a set of rules set by Gandhiji for the ashram community for spiritual progress and voluntary self control. The principle behind the observances was to do unto others what you want others to do unto you. Ivan Illich, the Croatian Austrian philosopher, had come to Sevagram Ashram in 1980 and stayed there for one whole week. And every day he would sit in Bapu Kuti, or Gandhiji's cottage, which was made up of bamboo and mud, and it was a very simple structure. So Ivan Illich spent a long time sitting there, and he said, and I quote, this hut of Mahatma Gandhi demonstrates to the world how the dignity of the common man can be brought up. It is also a symbol of happiness which we can derive from practicing the principles of simplicity, service, and truthfulness. Unquote. Now I will play the Gandhi Katha Dhun, which explains Gandhiji's philosophy of truth is God, Satya hi Parameshwar hai.
आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल.
Though Gandhiji's role and contributions to the political arena are well known, what is less known is his contribution towards health and wellness. Gandhiji was a firm believer in the principle that a healthy mind keeps the body healthy, and he stressed on the importance of a healthy lifestyle and positive thinking. His interest in health, hygiene, nutrition, and diseases was as great as his interest in politics. He insisted that adopting preventive measures for diseases was better than treatment. He also said that it was important to focus on cleanliness, a controlled diet, and an exercise regimen, and that it was best to avoid overconsumption of medicines, especially those that were not required. He was also a firm believer and practitioner of nature cure and conducted experiments related to diet and fasting from a very young age. He always believed that it was important to understand what caused diseases and then remove the very cause rather than falling ill again and again and then attempting to treat it with excessive medication. Gandhiji was essentially a man of science. He approached problems in a scientific manner. Mahatma Gandhi's message to the world on the vital question of health and well being is very important. To him, the study of this question was part of the service to God and His creation, which was his mission. Knowing to care summed up his life. This message was simple and easy to follow. It encouraged everyone to respect simplicity, voluntary self control, reduce the wants, follow the tradition, cultural practices, and the values, follow the environmental credo, and treat oneself through nature cure for living in harmony with nature. Gandhiji was very interested in health and wellness and remained ever vigilant about his own health as well as of others. He said that our lifestyle should be such that it should not let any disease come anywhere near us. And every person is responsible for looking after his or her body, mind, and spirit impeccably. He also advised that in order for keeping physically, mentally, and spiritually healthy, we should have perfect understanding of our bodies, which is made up of the five elements that are found in nature. And that is what has been told by our ancient seers and sages of India. And these five elements are air, water, fire, earth, and space. For the well being of our bodies, the balance and harmony between all these five elements is necessary. For Gandhiji, the outside universe was but a reflection of the inside universe. He repeated time and again that the universe is compressed in the atom. There is not one law for the atom and another for the universe. It was based on his actual spiritual experience that gave him the conviction that the moral principles have no meaning unless they can be made to serve as the guide of conduct in the daily affairs of man. The Sanskrit proverb Yatha Pinde Tatha Brahmande says, "You are the universe within the universe. As with the self, so is the universe. What is going on within you is same as what is going on in the universe." From the mind body perspective, Gandhiji's standpoint was that health is an optimal integration of body, mind, spirit, soul, and environment. Environment is our extended body. There is a very nice Vedic expression from the ancient traditions of India which says, "As is the atom, so is the universe. As is the microcosm, so is the microcosm. As is the universal body, so is the cosmic body. As is the universal mind, so is the cosmic mind." Yoga and meditation integrates all components of health, and Gandhiji was a strong believer and practitioner of nature cure, Ayurveda, and practiced Ashtanga Yoga as well. His experiments with nature cure were always on himself. He also advised his friends and followers to follow these remedies and treated and cured 30,000 patients through nature cure. Dr. Sherwood Eddy was a leading American Protestant missionary, prolific writer, and an educator who visited Mahatma Gandhi in the Sabarmati ashram in Gujarat in 1929 and wrote that Gandhiji's bodily presence is like that of Apostle Paul or Socrates. He said, and I quote, "He impressed us as the most childlike, the most transparent, the most lovable of man. His whole character is centered in his unique passion in truth and reality." Unquote. In the ashram, in the morning and evening prayers, every day, the first verse from the Ishopanishad, the shortest Upanishad from India, used to be recited, and it said, "Ishavasimidam sarvam yat kincha jagatyan jagat tena tyaktena bhunji tha Ma gridha kasya svidhanam, that everything in this universe belongs to God. Nothing really belongs to us. Enjoy the objects of the world in an attitude of perfect non attachment. Enjoy it with a feeling of sacrifice, taking to the extent that is necessary for you, and leave the rest for others in the society. Never ever crave the possession of others. Nothing really belongs to us. So, listening to this same thought, this same idea, renounce and rejoice, which is the essence of our Indian civilization, in the form of Gandhi Katha Dhun, Na yah tera, na yah mera. Very few people know that as a couple, Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi contributed immensely 123 years ago to public health emergency, serving as frontline workers fearlessly in case of all kinds of emergencies in the service of humanity in South Africa as well as in India. When they came back to India in 1915, in 1918, there was an outbreak worldwide of the Spanish influenza pandemic. Gandhiji opened up his Sabarmati ashram as a quarantine center and treated and served patients through nature cure, provided simple vegetarian diet to boost immunity, and maintained physical distancing. Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi took care of the families of the patients, looked after their physical, mental, and spiritual needs, gave them correct information, and helped them in being positive through prayer, meditation, and chanting of Ramanama, and taking care of each other during the time of the Spanish flu pandemic. Gandhiji had said on 10th November 1918, our ancestors could build such tough bodies in the past, but today we are reduced to a state of miserable weakness and are easily infected by noxious germs moving about in the air. There is one and only one really effective way by which we can save ourselves from them even in our present broken state of health. That way is the way of self restraint, sanyam, or by imposing a limit on our acts, wants, and desire. In August 1942, Gandhiji wrote the book Key to Health, in which he wrote that anyone who observes the rules of health mentioned in this book will find that he has got in it a real key to unlock the gates leading him to health. He will not need to knock at the doors of doctors or Vaidyas or the traditional health practitioners from day to day. Today, the world is facing three kinds of crises globally. First is the COVID 19 pandemic. The second is the serious and long drawn financial crisis. And the third is the ecological crisis, which is impacting everyone. We have to look for answers somewhere within ourselves while learning from the life of Mahatma Gandhi, whose life is so transparent, so open, so honest, and so truthful. And there is so much to learn from his life. The lesson the pandemic is teaching us is simple. When one member of the family falls sick, the entire family is affected, and soon the community is affected, the nation is affected, and then other communities in other nations in this globalized world. The well being of one individual has an impact on people on the other side of the globe. This is true of every action of ours. What we eat, what we buy, what we think, and what we do has reverberations and repercussions on all life on earth. It is this anubandha, this interconnectedness, that sustains all life on earth. We are all in this together, as one human family, connected as brothers and sisters. And whether we choose to see it or not, we only have one home. This planet Earth, our Mother Earth. Our ancient sages and seers have always looked upon us as Vishwamanava, global citizen, and said that the world is one family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The current COVID-19 pandemic is a wake-up call for every country, big or small, rich or poor, developed or developing. It has opened our eyes to the fragility of the existence of humans. We will have to learn to live with COVID 19 now and in the future as well. Instead of reinventing a new lifestyle, we just have to get inspired from the life of Mahatma Gandhi to make the necessary changes in thought, actions, and conduct for coping up physically, mentally, and spiritually. And this is the future that the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic is pointing out to us if we observe carefully. Many lessons are very clear and some are still unknown, surrounding us in uncertainty. This uncertainty is causing mental stress, anxiety, existential crisis, fear of extinction and death. And mass psychology of living in depression and grief is pointing out towards this fact in the current pandemic. We are collectively grieving for the loss of our known lifestyle. But if we still return to the normal standard of finding happiness by chasing after money, power, position, lifelong consumerism, then COVID 19 has given us the wake up call. This kind of lifestyle of empty consumerism and mass distractions has only increased the differences between the rich and the poor, created the huge carbon footprint, and increased the misery of the invisible poor masses. When a crisis makes you feel stressed, meditation, prayer, chanting relieves the stress response. Fear and anxiety are forms of stress that become exaggerated when events become uncertain, when you feel a loss of control over the situation, and when the stress keeps repeating itself without let up. The thinking mind reacts to all of these conditions. It always has, even in normal times. But a crisis brings stress into high relief, making it very capable of lowering the immune system of our bodies and causing inflammatory diseases. Decades ago, stress was classified as epidemic of modern life. The Gandhian way of life is the best guide to practicing the coping mechanism that induces relaxation, calmness, inner peace, absence of anxiety, absence of fear, and remaining positive. Therefore, Gandhiji comes across as the greatest healer and the wellness guru who comes free of cost. The Gandhian principles of freedom from fear and care for all is a perfect prescription in the times of crisis. Gandhiji's emphasis on healthy lifestyle, positive thinking, empowerment for self-care and care in the community would make perfect sense. I once again take this opportunity to thank the Indian Mission for hosting Gandhi Katha. My special thanks are to all of you who have joined me online today. I will end with the peace benediction in Sanskrit for the universal welfare. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shantihi. Let all be happy. Let all be healthy. Let all experience auspiciousness. Let no one be overwhelmed by grief. Om, peace, peace, peace. With Gandhiji's blessings, who had said that peace is the only positive force which will lead us from darkness towards light, I will end the Gandhi Katha with the Gandhi Katha hymn, Shubha Mangal Ho. May there be auspicious good. May there be good. May the earth be auspicious. May the sky be auspicious. May every particle on earth be auspicious.
मंगल हो शुभ मंगल हो है